Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Anthony Hinnon, Pennsylvania reporter for the Center Square. Joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania editor, Kristen Smith. Kristen, we have a new proposed constitutional amendment. What is it? What's happening?
Two senators are circulating a co-sponsorship memo, which is the very early development stages of an amendment that would limit the authority of cabinet secretaries. So this is something that the legislature has tried to do in the past couple of years. It's definitely a symptom of the COVID-19 pandemic. There were a lot of secretaries that cycled in and out of their positions during those few years. And former Governor Tom Wolf had a habit of nominating people for these positions, but not actually submitting them to the Senate to begin the official confirmation process, which is a hearing and then a full chamber vote. And it's unclear where that process begins and ends, of course. And this is from the senator's perspective. They said that Wolf didn't do his job. And so they want to put an amendment in place of the Constitution that says, you cannot do this. If you're not going to put the nominee through the full vetting, then they cannot assume certain responsibilities that affect everyone in the state. Their position is that they represent the voters, and when you don't give the senators the chance to ask questions of unelected officials, then you are not representing their interests. I think a lot of people can remember the statewide mask mandates and some of the other closure policies related to the pandemic and how those were enforced by the Department of Health and its subsequent acting secretaries after Rachel Levine left for federal government. And so that's where the genesis of this is. It didn't get anywhere last session, and now it's up again for this session.
So has Governor Shapiro commented on this, or do we have any feedback on his stance?
We reached out to Governor Shapiro to find out where he stands on all this. They didn't want to give a comment because the official legislation hasn't been proposed. Again, this is not exactly a problem that his administration has faced yet. They've only been in for 9 months, and his first round of appointees just got confirmed within the last 2 or 3 months. It seems like it's not an unreasonable expectation, though, that secretaries will come and go over the next 4 years. And so even if he hasn't faced this now, it will happen in the future. And I could imagine then that there's going to be some, push and pull here. There's going to be accusations that this is partisan, and that's the kind of thing that will unfold. But I think there's been some change recently on the attitude around constitutional amendments. We've had several amendments in the last couple of years that have been pretty high profile. And so as such, lawmakers have kind of moved to change the rules around them. The House earlier this year adopted new rules that would say, not only do we not vote on constitutional amendments until the November general election, but we also have to have hearings on them before we vote on them as a chamber. So when this does move through the process and get introduced formally as a bill, there's going to be hearings. There's going to be a lot of discussion about this and consideration. And now the timeline of it has been set in stone even more further, and there's more restrictions on it than in years past. So at some point, Shapiro will weigh in. It's just this early in the process, he's decided not to.
Now, Republicans do control the Senate, but is this amendment likely to happen? Is this sort of an early bluster that ends up in nothing, or does this have a legitimate shot at making it out onto the ballot and possibly into the Pennsylvania Constitution?
It's a tricky question because constitutional amendments are something that both parties, even if they vehemently disagree with the ballot question itself, they are reticent to keep voters from having their say on it. One of the ways that they kind of prevent that from happening is stalling or letting these amendments just peter out because they die when the legislative session is over every 2 years. Given the way that our General Assembly is split, it's likely that the Senate would approve it. It's coming from 2 Republican senators. This is an initiative that they've been pushing for the last couple of years, and they have agreement from House Republicans on the same thing because House Republicans tried to do it as well. And so reading the tea leaves, it seems obvious that the Senate would pass it. It's much less obvious in the House, where Democrats have their slim majority and are going to see this as, a political play, kind of retribution for what happened during the pandemic. And so there is a strong possibility that they won't bring it for a vote. And so what's complicating this factor as well, as I mentioned earlier, is that the timeline for our constitutional amendment is different than the rest of the bills. You have to approve it in both chambers in 2 consecutive legislative sessions. We have 2-year sessions. So let's say they did all of this before the end of the year. They would still have to wait another year for this session to end and then do it again in the following year. And then they would have to wait for a November general election. So we're talking several years down the line before voters may even see this on the ballot. But that doesn't mean that it won't happen at all. Things change every 2 years, or, we have elections in the House every 2 years, could change the balance there. So it's something that we have to keep on the radar. I'm sure it's not something that Republicans are going to forget or about anytime soon. However, it's not a slam dunk like some of their past constitutional amendments have been, because they control both chambers.
Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Kristen Smith, this is Anthony Hinnon. Please subscribe, and thanks for listening.